Welcome, everybody. We are going to spend an hour with Al Watt, the author of many wonderful coaching books for writers, the latest one being the 90-Day Memoir. And that's what we're here to discuss tonight. The book is outstanding. I've read it. It's a very unusual, interesting book. I think of it as an entire course on writing between two covers. So hopefully we can get our questions answered and just have a really great time with Al. Before we start, we'd like everybody just to wave to Al, let him know that you're here and paying attention.
I'm
And
waving back.
he's waving back. And then
Jazz hands.
I'd also ask you to mute yourselves, and that will help out too, so that some background noise doesn't work its way into the discussion. Okay, I'm not going to waste any time. We want to dive right in and get started. Al is meeting with us from Canada. One of the benefits of the pandemic was that we all learned how to use Zoom. So we are
right.
very fortunate to have this opportunity. So I want to start with a very simple question, and again, I've asked Al just to elaborate at whatever depth he wants to. Okay, so I'm going to change the order of my questions. This was the fourth question that I sent you. Do you think everyone should write a memoir? Why or why not?
Oh gosh, I feel like most of if you're a writer, it sort of feels like it feels like no, I don't think everyone should write a memoir. Not because everybody doesn't have a story to tell, but because writing is really hard work. I mean, it's also it can be really fun and exciting and thrilling, but you all know that when a story idea comes to you, it sort of gets its hooks in you, doesn't it? It sort of grabs you, and you're like, you wake up in the middle of the night, oh my God, I got to write this down. But doesn't it also sort of feel like a bit like is it Carl Jung who called it the daemon? It's like the demon. It's if we didn't have to write, we probably wouldn't. Don't you think? Don't you have that feeling like, good, I mean, is there anything if I could be doing anything else, I would be doing it. But it's sort of like I don't think that we're really the author. I think that at best we're the co-creator. I really think of ourselves as the channel for the story that wants to come through us. Because think about the story ideas, you don't know where they came from. Even if you're writing a memoir, if you gave the facts of your life to 10 different writers, they would write 10 completely different stories with completely different voices, and they would have a completely different perspective on those facts. So I really believe that the desire to write is really the desire to evolve by resolving something that we're seeking to understand. Do you understand what I mean? Resolving something. And what we're really resolving, I think, is some kind of inner dilemma. I really believe that to be human is to struggle with dilemmas, not problems. I don't think problems make for interesting stories. You know, for example, let's say I get a flat tire, I call AAA, they fix my tire. Problem solved. Not an interesting story. But what if I get a flat tire? I'm out in the desert, for all of you out in the desert, and I'm getting very thirsty, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to make it. And I call AAA, and the guy comes out, and it's the man who's sleeping with my wife. Now I have a dilemma. I want to kill the man who's here to save my life. That could be an interesting story as they drive back to civilization. Because story really isn't about, am I going to get what I want? You know, am I going to get revenge? Story really is about, am I going to reframe my relationship to my goal? Okay, so story, if all that happens in your story is your protagonist gets what they want, our reader is going to be disappointed, don't you think? You imagine if Jimmy Stewart at the end of It's a Wonderful Life left Bedford Falls? That would be very disappointing. That's not what the story is about. Story is about we get what we need, and in getting what we need, it becomes possible to have what we want if what we want belongs in our life. I feel like, Mike, I feel like I veered from your original question.
No, no, you're fine. And
Really?
it's
Because I'm not
interesting.
even sure I remember the original question.
It's funny because in It's a Wonderful Life, the movie begins with him always wanting to leave, with his,
Yeah,
wanting to get those stickers on his suitcase from
right.
all the different places he was going to see in the world. But you're right. That's
And
what he
that's
wants, not what he needs.
and that's why when you think of one of the first things I work with when I work with writers is helping them connect to it's getting out of your head, it's getting from the head to the heart and getting to what's this thing actually about? What's it really about? You already know that if you're writing a memoir, you already know what happened. You already know the events. But now it's about distilling those events to their nature so that we can find some kind of thematic consistency. What's the dramatic through line of this story? What is that primal desire that your protagonist is seeking? And when you can distill that primal desire, whether it's security or survival or connection or meaning or purpose or ambition, when you connect to that primal desire, you're connecting to the engine that's driving your narrative. And that's the thing that's going to get reframed by the end of the story. I'll give you an example. Let's say my story is about freedom. I want to be free. Perhaps your protagonist believes at the beginning of the story that when I escape the prison of this family, or it could be a literal prison, when I escape my situation, then I'll be free. But by the end of the story, your protagonist recognizes that there is no escape. That true freedom might come from confronting my oppressor or speaking my truth. The true freedom can only really come from within. It can't come from escaping my situation. And so that's what I mean by reframing our relationship to that primal desire. I think there's two ingredients to any dilemma. And the two ingredients are a powerful desire. The protagonist has to want something. The stakes are life and death. If I don't get blank, my life will be unimaginable. Powerful desire and a false belief. A false belief is a misperception of myself or the world. Misperception is that so the dilemma, let's say the dilemma of faith. All right, faith. What is the dilemma of faith? Powerful desire. I want to believe. And the false belief might be show me proof, then I will believe. You follow? Do you see the dilemma of faith? Dilemma of justice. Justice, powerful desire. I want justice to be done. False belief. When I destroy my enemy, justice will be done. Follow? But if all that happens is at the end of the story, I destroy my enemy, you can already feel in your bones that's not a satisfying story. I have to reframe my relationship to what justice means. And perhaps through complication in the story, I discover that justice is far more nuanced. It's a far bigger gray area than I thought. And I realized that maybe I'm even complicit in this crime. And that if I destroy my enemy, I will never experience true peace in my life because that's not true justice. So story isn't about will justice be done. Story is about will I reframe my relationship to what justice means.
I thought it was fascinating that in the questions that you ask in the exercises that you put in the book, they aren't what I expected. The first question is, what are you afraid of? Starting this
Yeah.
project, what are you afraid of? And that opened me up to thinking about things I had never thought about before. So it's just fascinating how the questions literally just take you in directions you did not expect. Okay, I'm going to open it up to somebody else's question. Does anybody have a question they want to ask Al?
And while we're waiting, I'll talk about fears for a second because when you tap into your fears and when you make yourself vulnerable on the page, you instantly make your work universally relatable because you're tapping into something that's primal and whatever it is. And the fears that you have in writing your story are identical in nature, whether you're writing fiction or memoir, they're identical in nature to the fears that your protagonist has in the story. And so it's a way of suddenly flipping everything and going, that thing that scared you about writing your story actually is your pot of gold. It's your way into the story.
Yeah. What I've learned from your book is nobody's going to read our memoir to find out about us. They're going to read
That's
our
right.
memoir to find out about themselves. So it has to
Yeah.
have that universal aspect to it. Otherwise, it's not relevant.
Well, it's the difference between autobiography and memoir. Autobiography is often anecdotal. Autobiography is typically written by celebrities, and they're usually and oftentimes we go to autobiography because we're interested in the facts of Elizabeth Taylor's life or whoever it is, right? And and so they're not as invested in having some kind of thematic consistency because we often read autobiography just out of sheer curiosity for the events of their life. But with memoir, you're telling a story. And so the story wants to build in meaning as it progresses. And it's building in meaning based on this theme, this dramatic question. How can I be free? What does it mean to have faith? Whatever it is.
Okay, this is the quietest I've ever seen this group. Anybody have a question they want to ask? This is your opportunity. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
I do.
Kimberly.
Hi there. Can you tell too much? I wrote a kind of a poetic memoir, maybe probably, I don't think it's 30 pages. I didn't want to, it was my first and I was just trying to see what would happen. But
Yeah.
I was brutally honest about everything that had happened to me going through my depression. And then I looked at it and I was like, I didn't know if I put too much out there or can you put too much? Can you tell too much of who you are? I
Well,
thought
Kimberly,
people would identify with that.
I don't know about the rest of you. I don't know about the rest of you, but now I really want to read your memoir. Don't you guys?
Yeah.
When somebody says, I think I just told too much. I think I revealed everything. I mean, congratulations. That's fantastic. That's
Okay,
so
so
remember that the purpose of story is to reveal a transformation. That's so everything in your memoir is moving inexorably toward transformation. So my guess is that this is while this is a story about depression, it's really a story about your journey to some kind of healing.
yes, exactly.
I love it. And so when you think about, I think about story in terms of a 3-act structure. And the first act is thesis, the second act is antithesis, and the third act is synthesis. The first act, thesis, is this dramatic question. So it might have to do in Kimberly's situation. Kimberly, I don't know anything about your story, but maybe it's this cause of depression, or maybe there's an inciting incident where we experience this sort of presenting problem, the thing that causes or appears to cause the depression.
Okay.
And then act 2 is antithesis. It's the drama played out. It's like, how can I deal with this depression? How can I find my way out of this depression? My guess is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but by the end of the second act, there's a dark night of the soul where Kimberly perhaps realizes that no matter what I do, nothing seems to be working. Is it possible that there's a moment in your story where it just feels hopeless?
Yeah, at the beginning of the story. And it's I'm a Christian, so it's Christian based, and I was having issues with my identity, and I was stating the reason why one is depressed, at least I'm depressed. It's because I didn't really fully know who I was. And the bottom line is, it doesn't really stop paying attention and stop comparing yourself to everybody else around you when the creator of the universe is the one that tells you who you are. And that's
Right.
kind of
Now,
where
I love that. That's amazing. And so we're getting a little background noise. And here's the thing, is that if it was that easy, if I just needed to stop comparing myself to others, I would have done that in Act 1.
Hello.
So Act 3. So remember, thesis is Act 1, antithesis is Act 2, and Act 3 is synthesis or integration. And so
are you saying synthesis?
Synthesis, integration.
Synthesis. Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, story is not about I just need to stop comparing myself to others, because my guess is that the more I try to stop, it's like don't stop thinking about elephants. All we do is we think about elephants, right?
Right.
So I can't, nature abhors a vacuum. I can't stop comparing myself to others. I need to reframe. I need to start. Story isn't about what, it's not about what happens. It's about the meaning we ascribe to what happens. So it's about why am I comparing myself to others? And so my guess is that in by the end of the second act, there's a dark night of the soul where I want you guys to think about this for a second. Can you think of a cry into the void for your protagonist somewhere about 3/4 of the way through your memoir? I want you to consider a moment where your protagonist feels like all is lost. I'll give you some examples of cries into the void, because it's primal. It's universal. I'm all alone. Nobody loves me. Nobody sees me. I'm invisible. I have failed. I can't go on. And here's the amazing thing, because I think this is the pivotal moment in story. This is where the magic happens. And when you give this to your reader, this is where they'll stay up all night reading with a flashlight, because this is the moment where it's impossible to get what I want. It's impossible to get what I want based on my current approach. It's not difficult, it's impossible. And so I'm going to act it out for you. Let's say it's I'm all alone. Everything in the story has led your protagonist has been trying to find a connection, and everything they do to get what they want has led them to this state of isolation. Do you follow? In other words, you're going to notice in your story that your protagonist's desire, ironically, prevents them from achieving their goal. So my desire for connection prevents me from achieving true connection. My desire for freedom leads me to bondage. Does that make sense? The more I try to be free, the more I chase my idea of freedom, the further I move into bondage. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then what happens is end of Act 2 is like a coin with two sides. On one side is despair. I'll never be free. And then on the other side is a wider perspective or a new hope. Oh my God, I'll never be free as long as I continue to pursue freedom outside of myself. And I discover that true freedom comes from within. When I discover that true freedom comes from within, that's the beginning of your third act. And this is where the stakes really start to rise, because you begin to pursue what you need as opposed to what you want. It doesn't mean I don't still want success, justice, but I recognize that as long as I make an external, or as long as I make my something external, or my freedom based on something external, I will always be in bondage to that thing out there. And that's the magic. That's the ace you have up your sleeve as a storyteller, is that you know that your protagonist is going to have to surrender the meaning they made out of their goal in order to be transformed.
Can you tell me what the synthesis means again?
Synthesis is integration. I think the story is
Integration.
two seemingly disparate ideas that come together to reveal a deeper truth. Two seemingly disparate ideas. So like, so they're getting integrated. So for example, if let's say I desire, let's say I want to be free, but I don't trust myself.
Okay.
And so I want you, or let's say I want security. Let's say I'm looking for security, right? That's a very common theme, right? Security. So let's say I'm looking for security outside of myself. I'm going to look for it in a relationship or in a job situation, or I'm gonna join a group that's really unsafe, but they provide me with this temporary state of security, but I have to give my power away to them. Does that make sense? And so by the end of the story, I discovered that true security comes from within. So, but I have to trust myself. So that's what I mean by two. What I'm integrating is security and trust.
Okay.
So if you're
Integration, two different measurements.
Yeah.
Kimberly,
Yes.
if you look on page 137 and on day 31 of the 90 days, it's all about synthesis.
Okay. I must
So
get the book. Okay.
you must get the book. You must get the book. Maybe you'll win one tonight. We'll see.
The only
Maybe.
one tonight.
Maybe. Thank you, Al.
My pleasure.
So if I could just dovetail on what you're saying, Al, for those of us that are going through the book and going through the exercises, this is why the exercises are so important, because the depth of understanding and the depth of realization that you're talking about, we're not aware of it at first. We have to come to that understanding, and we only come to it through this process of introspection that you force us into by the questions that you ask.
This is not an intellectual book. It's not an academic textbook. Although apparently the Stanford is using the 90-day novel. I was talking to one of my students and I said, how'd you hear about me? And she said, well, my professor at Stanford gives us all your book. And so I called the professor. She said, well, we all use it, but it's not an academic book. It's a very, it's speaking to your higher self.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
more, it's more of a, it's like a journey, like a personal journey.
Yeah.
Judy,
Yeah.
you have a question. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I have two questions.
Yes.
One is, I have this book, but I know another book was coming out. It says now also for Memoir. Is that the book that we run off of, or is there actually another book that came out beginning of December? Because I
Yeah.
got this before December. And the second question is maybe for some of the people here, could you talk about the process? It's 90 days, but I know it's kind of divided into 3 months. Could you like give an overview for people so they know what to expect if they go on this journey with you? Like what, you know, so what is the mindset you would need to participate?
Okay, let me answer the first question because so yeah, the book you held up, I think that's the 3rd edition of the 90-day novel, and it includes, yes, I thought I was going to get away with it. I thought I could just put a chapter in there for Memoir, but my students kept saying we want our own class. So I created so the new book that came out in December is a completely new book that's specifically geared for memoirists.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, your question, you need to ask me again.
Okay, could you just review for some of those who haven't maybe gone through it chapter by chapter? It's 90 days. I know you've kind of divided it up into 3 months. Could you give everyone like a real big, you know, bird's eye view of what the expectation would be to do this 90-day novel?
Beautiful.
What the lifestyle is.
Well, so the first month, you're not even writing your first draft. We're doing something I call imagining the world of your story. You're doing a lot of stream of consciousness writing exercises, and you're working with the structure questions. The structure questions are questions that are designed to really access your imagination and help you move beyond your idea of your story to the truth of your story. So I teach story structure as an experiential model as opposed to a conceptual model. I think story structure, for me, it was always taught as this sort of formula, and I always rebelled against it. And I always felt like I was kind of stupid. Like, why can't I figure this out? But I realized story structure is typically taught by story analysts, and I don't think like that. I think like a storyteller, like a writer. And so if you've ever read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on the 5 stages of grief, on death and dying, she identifies the 5 stages, and I think they're depression, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and something else. Anybody? Well, in the same way there are 5 stages of grief, there are a series of stages that the human being always seems to go through in their journey toward a transformation. If I were to distill these experiences to 3 words, I would say they are desire. Your protagonist has to want something. The stakes are life and death. Always. The stakes are always life and death. If Jan Brady doesn't get a date with Tad Hamilton, she'll absolutely die. Okay, they're always life and death. Desire, and then surrender. At some point, your protagonist has to surrender the meaning they made out of this goal. That's the all is lost moment. And it's only as a result of the surrender that there can be a transformation. So desire, surrender, transformation. That at its core, I think, are the 3 elements that every story requires in order to be a really satisfying story. Did I answer the question? Judy?
Yes, and it looks like, so every day you'd be expected to write every day because there are prompts and questions that guide you through this big, long, everything that you need to start working on, right? And it looks like the first month was imagining the world, and then it was like Act 1 and then Act 2.
Right. And so the second month and the third month are writing your first draft. And so writing a book could be extremely overwhelming, as we all know. So what we're doing is we're breaking it down into small incremental pieces. And so starting on week 5, when you start writing your first draft, you've just got this small beat. You're just going to write up to an inciting incident, to the why is this day unlike any other moment. Within this framework, you can do anything. There are no rules in writing a memoir. There truly are no rules. You can do anything you want, but there are principles. And so what I don't want you to think in terms of, Mike, you sent me a question and you used the word fit. What if my story doesn't fit into this? Writers ask me this, into this form. It's not a formula. And writers ask me this all the time. And when I hear the word fit, that clues me into the writers in their head, and they're trying to. So there's something you got to remember in memoir. It doesn't have to be chronological. There's nothing to fit. In fact, if you like, and I'm going to show you this at the end of the session. I can send you some outlines for Cheryl Strayed's Wild. Did you read Wild? Do you remember that memoir? Wild. If it's a beautifully structured. I mean, how do you write a memoir that lasts over 400 pages, and it's just somebody walking on a trail? Well, it's because the story builds in meaning as it progresses, and it's so beautifully structured, but it's not chronological. The end of Act 1 in Wild is a flashback to the moment she realizes that she must leave her husband. And so if you think in terms of fitting, you might be thinking in terms of chronology, as opposed to the experiential beats that one goes through. Same with The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. There's some turning points in the second act of that book that are flashbacks. they're memories of her relationship with her husband prior to his death. And so I don't know, did I answer your question? Yeah, okay.
So Al, lastly, I've got to tell you this story real quick. My granddaughter and I was at a function last night. My granddaughter was sitting across the table from me. She broke her wrist, so she's in a sling. But she said, Pop, and she did this just a few days ago. She said, I'm having to do all my writing with my left hand because she broke her right hand. So
Wow.
I told her, I'm learning how to write with my non-dominant hand. So we sat there and we wrote together with our non-dominant hand. My
That's
question
amazing.
to you is, why are you having us write with our non-dominant hand? Can you unpack that for us?
I can. And my question for you is, what was your experience when you did it?
It wasn't bad. It's weird watching the words go this way instead of, behind my hand. They're going in front of my hand, which is
It
a
does.
different experience.
It's when we write from our non-dominant hand, we're suddenly having to do something that is not something we do naturally. So we start to become very conscious of the act, and it takes us to basically it takes you to your inner child. It takes you to a place that can be really surprising. And so the purpose of the non-dominant handwriting is to access your true voice. It bypasses your idea of what the sort of the facile answer is, and it takes you to it's often very surprising when you start writing with your non-dominant hand and you ask your non-dominant hand a question like how are you feeling today, and it answers you. Sometimes the answer is shocking. So just give it a shot. Don't you might be surprised with what happens.
I noticed too that when you have us writing with our non-dominant hand, it's always a dialogue with yourself. So you're putting us into that kind of a situation also where we are having to be almost confronting ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. So with because memoir, memoir is not about the facts of your life. Memoir is about the truth of your experience. And so this non-dominant handwriting will sometimes by doing this non-dominant handwriting, it just sometimes it can get underneath those areas where we didn't realize we were keeping secrets from ourselves.
Interesting. Rose has a question. Go ahead, Rose.
Well, it's more
And
of a
then
comment.
June, you'll be next.
It's more of a comment because I taught young kids for several years. And I would think because you have to work so hard to produce, you're going to get to the answer a lot quicker in shorter sentences because you want the point and not have to struggle with what the answer is.
Right.
So that's the way it would be for me.
Are you talking about the non-dominant handwriting?
Yes, and you use a non-dominant hand. I would work to get the answer quicker because I don't want to struggle having to write all the words out. I would get to the answer in the shortest way possible.
Right, I understand. So you would prefer not to do the non-dominant handwriting?
No, I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it. I think it would make me focus on exactly what do I want to say and how best can I say it, and not have to struggle so much because the idea would be the most important, not the writing.
Yes, exactly. The non-dominant handwriting is not to generate prose. It's to experience a breakthrough.
Nice, nice. Okay, June, go ahead, please.
Well, as an ambidextrous person, this is a fascinating topic. I'll have to write with my feet. No, but my question, Al, I have wondered how, people learn to do that when they lose their arm. Yeah. So
Wasn't there a Daniel Day-Lewis movie, My Left Foot?
no,
Yeah. My left foot. Daniel
Yep.
Day-Lewis. He was painting with his left foot.
Oh,
I
wow.
think no, or he was writing. Yeah. Right. It's all right. So
Oh, anyway, Al, this is great, and I just bought both of your books on over my Kindle, and I just was looking at the novel one, noticing where it said, "Don't tell anybody about your story," and
Yeah.
then if you have to tell them something or other, something or other. So I just wondered, Al, if you could tell us what you think about the idea of having critique groups for pieces of our work.
I think critique groups are valuable once you've completed your first draft. I think they can be extremely destructive prior to that. I think that the desire, I think that I think our spirit wants to express itself, and it doesn't know the difference between telling someone the story and writing it down. And so when you just tell it to somebody, you're taking the air out of the balloon. There's a certain creative tension that we experience as we're living with this story. You know it in the morning, right? If you're working on something every day, you start to vibrate at that frequency. You're tuned into it. You go into the market and you hear somebody say something the next time, and you're like, I can use that, or just the way the light hits the leaves on the tree, and you're like, God, I never knew that when the light hit it like that, the tree became, it became, it was actually lily white, and I thought that, well, whatever it is, you suddenly see the world through the lens of the story that you're telling. But if you start to tell people it, the reason you're telling it is you're either like asking for approval on some subconscious level, or you're wanting to impress me. Hey, what do you think of this? And both of them are dangerous because people, even well-intentioned, are going to offer you their feedback. And some of the feedback can be helpful, I suppose. But I also think it can be really dangerous. My writing completely changed, and I started to have some success with my writing when I stopped talking about it while I was writing the first draft.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Have you guys ever had the experience of getting really excited by a story and you start writing it and then you share it with somebody and then they take a big dump on it? They don't even do it intentionally. They're like, oh, I think I've seen that. They can say anything and it can kill the joy. But it's why women don't tell people they're pregnant in the first trimester, the first 3 months, the first 90 days. Keep it to yourselves. Wouldn't you rather tell people, what sounds better? I'm working on a novel, or I just finished a first draft of a novel?
So
The
Al,
book. And by the way, one more. Sorry, Mike.
go ahead, go ahead.
The 90-day memoir book, I intentionally put in discussion topics for groups. But you'll notice at the end of the preparation section, I say, don't read your work. You can read your writing exercises. You can even use the discussion topics to stay connected to each other, because you can there's something about the energy of a group that's really powerful. But I would not encourage you to read your raw material until you get to the end. Mike, sorry.
No, that's fine. And I thought those questions were extremely helpful. Because we are a social community, and we like to talk to each other and we like to interact. So you gave us an out. You gave us a way to interact without telling our stories to each other, which was very helpful.
Yeah. But we also have to have some boundaries around it. You've got to protect this. It's like a living organism. You got to protect it while it's so nascent and fragile. You're exploring. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So, something I've noticed, a big question right now is, does a memoir have to be factual? Does it all have to be actually true? Or can it be based on a true story? What are your feelings about that aspect of it?
Hey, listen, I don't have any. I think you can do anything you want. I just think that if it's not going to be factual, there needs to be some kind of disclaimer at the beginning. We need to know that this is faction. Is that what they call it? Faction. Yeah, you can do.
Faction?
We're all artists. You're making art. This isn't. There aren't any rules to anything that we're doing. And so yeah, you could. I think you can do anything you like.
Well, see, my fear would be that I would write this memoir, people would read it, and then somebody would ask me, wow, how did you make it through that? Or well, that really didn't happen. Then it doesn't, I think it loses something.
Well, I don't think that's really memoir then. That's something else. That's what are they, is it creative nonfiction?
Creative nonfiction, super creative nonfiction.
Super creative, yeah. Yeah, highly. My son, when I speak to him, he's full of creative nonfiction. Ray, did you have you come off the TV yet? Yup. Raymond.
So in your 3-act structure, I noticed that your acts are not the same size.
Right.
Can
So
you
act
can
one
you
is,
speak to that?
sure, act one is typically a quarter of your book. Act two is typically half of the book proportionately, and act three is typically the final quarter. So a quarter, a half, a quarter. And but you could break act two down the middle. You could think of your story as 4 sort of equal sections. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. That's a very good question. But that does seem to be the way it is, that there's a lot more. The second act journey is much longer than act one and act three. The act one is the setup. Act two is the whole drama played out. And then act three is the resolution. So act two is usually, well, they're all challenging. So go ahead, what were we gonna ask?
No, I want to open it up. Does anybody have any other questions?
Want to comment?
Ray. Oh, okay, I know Ray has a question.
I was just going to state that sometimes sharing it with the people can be one thing. Just verbalizing it out loud to yourself, you can begin to diminish the creative energy that's pushing you to write that story. So yeah, for sure, by sharing it out loud, you're really waning that energy that's the driving force for you to write. Yeah.
That's how I feel. Now in the workshop, I call it the lab. My workshop is called LA Writers Lab, and people read their writing exercises in the class, and I ask them questions about their story, but I'm very careful to never impose. So I would never say, "Wouldn't it be great if you did this?" My job is to facilitate the writer in finding the story that lives fully and completely within them. I really believe that the story already lives fully and completely within you. But yet your idea of your story is never the whole story. So it's a bit like a Zen koan. The story is all there, but sometimes in bringing it up to the conscious mind, we can sort of mess with it. And so the challenge, and what these books are really doing, is they're keeping your left brain busy, which is your rational sort of organizing part, so that your right brain, which is the seat of your genius, can really do the work. So that's why you're getting a lot of writing exercises that keep your left brain really satisfied that it's performing tasks. But your right brain is the seat of your genius. And that's the part that I'm really talking to. That's the part that creates all sorts of nonlinear you're only going to recognize at the end of your first draft, you're going to recognize patterns that your subconscious created that you didn't recognize while you were doing them, because you're connected to this primal thing. I'll give you an example. When you connect to the primal drive in your character, you're going to recognize that the desire never changes. It's the beating heart of your story. And yet, so your approach to getting what you want is constantly changing. So I'll give you an example. Let's say Billy wants connection. So he asks Sally out on a date. Desire for connection never goes away. Billy wants connection. So he asks Sally to marry him. Billy wants connection. So he gets married. Billy wants connection. So he has an affair. Billy wants connection. So he gets a divorce. Billy wants connection. So he goes back to his ex-wife and says, oh my God, I made a terrible mistake. Because story isn't about will Billy find connection. Story is about will Billy reframe his relationship to what connection means. At the beginning of the story, Billy thought connection happened outside of himself. But by the end of the story, Billy discovers that he was disconnected from himself. And in becoming connected to himself, he's able to recognize the connection that belongs in his life. Hopefully Sally tells him it's too late. Anyway.
Rose, you had a question, and then Lillian, you come next.
Yes,
Thank you.
I was just wondering, and maybe I misunderstood, a little while ago you mentioned about holding on to your story until it's completed. Is that a way of holding on to your voice too? Because sometimes when you share too early, other people's voices will kind of step on your voice and kind of push it down, and their voices are coming out, and your voices kind of become minimal. And I noticed if I share too early, that's what happens to my writing.
All right, I'm going to share you guys. I'm going to tell you why I am so passionate about what you just said. Because I wrote for about 12 years, and I was a stand-up comic. So I was on the road, and I made a living doing stand-up comedy. But during the day, I wrote 8 hours a day. I approached writing the way my siblings went to medical school. So I wrote every day, 7 days a week. But I didn't sell any of my writing for the first 12 years. And then but I was always trying to write what I thought the market wanted. I was talking to my stories, and I was doing exactly what you just described. And I wasn't really writing the true story that wanted to be told. And then one day I woke up and I had this epiphany. I said, I love writing more than anything in my life. And I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. But I'm so tired of trying to write something that will sell, because so I'm going to write the story I've always wanted to write. And it was this really dark story. It was very strange, dark story. And I'm not going to tell anybody I'm doing it. And I wrote it very quickly. I wrote it in 45 days. I didn't write it in 90 days. I wrote the first draft in 45 days while I was on the road doing stand-up. And this was in 98. And then I did a quick rewrite, and I got it to a book agent, and she auctioned it. And I was offered $1 million for my first novel. And it became a bestseller. It won best novel in France. And it gave me a career. And so this is why I'm so passionate about this, because I know that I didn't write that book. It came through me. It was a very humbling process, because I just got up every morning, and I was like said a prayer to the writing God. I was like, you tell me what wants to be written, and I'm not gonna take any outside advice. I'm nothing. And this thing just poured out of me. Now, I had done the work prior to it, where I had developed an outline. I had an idea of how I wanted the story to go. But when I started writing the first draft, it came out very quickly. And if you look at a lot of really successful writers, they'll tell you, write the first draft quickly. Get it down before you have enough. You want enough time to get all the words down, but not so much time that you start to think. You start to take in everything people have to say. And once that's when you muck up the works. So.
Okay, Lillian, very quickly, because we have to give Al some time. I promised him some time at the end. So go ahead. You're the last question.
on addressing this business of talking. I get so excited about my work
Yeah,
that it's hard to contain it.
I know.
I
I
want to
know.
share it. And when I read your words, you know, if don't talk about this, and then you said, if you have, stop. And it's very hard to stop
I know it
talking
is.
about.
I know it is.
The other
But you know
thing-
what? You'll write faster because you can't wait to share it.
Yes.
Can,
And
the writing will it will have, I don't know how to, it will have a different energy. It's sort of like, it's like a meditation practice where you sit. Meditation isn't about just being calm. It can be about sitting with the discomfort. Sit with the exquisite discomfort of not telling somebody. It's like a muscle. And the more you work it, you know, we were just in LA a few weeks ago, and a couple of my students had us over for dinner. And I'm sitting there at dinner. One of my students says, "What are you working on?" And I said, "Oh, I can't tell you." And she says, "I just told you all about what I was working on." I said, "I know." And my wife said, "He doesn't even tell me what he's working." And it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. In fact, my agents just read a pilot yesterday, my TV agents, and they want to go out with this pilot that I just wrote. My wife just started reading it last night. This is something that it's already going out into the world. And she was like, she's like, "Do you mind if I read it?" I said, "No, you can read it now. It's hopefully going to get sold. You can read it now."
When I first started your book and started doing the exercises, they were very, I had a very heavy month of dealing with my emotions because it got past facts and got into the depth of my feelings and emotions and made me write down things that I really didn't consider worthy of writing down.
Wow.
And so it made me do these things. And then I wanted to say, I don't know if I need to be writing that. But as I have, as it has evolved, it's turned out to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Pointing out the negative and then what really did happen in the end result of how that was all worked through by the people I'm writing about in my life. You know, because
so well said.
Because my brothers and I were very close.
Yeah.
And so you know, they're very involved in my story.
Yeah.
And I have to write about that relationship. But you made me do that, which was good.
Lillian, that was beautifully said. I want to say something. Through this process, your story asks everything of you for a reason. Because if it didn't, you'd never surrender. In other words, our story comes to us as an invitation to let go of a limiting belief we have about ourselves or the world. But here's the good news. The answer is always love. The answer is always more freedom, an absence of shame, greater connection to self, always. It's just that, as Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. At some point in your second act, it's going to be like, oh my God, this is really, it's bringing up a lot of stuff, and that will happen. But it's all coming up in order to get contextualized so that there can be some kind of transformation. And that's what we have to trust as storytellers, is that we're taking the reader on a journey of transformation.
Yes. And you also suggested doing something by bullets and just write certain things as fast as you can with bullets. And I found that some of them are short and some of them are extra long, and they probably will all end up in my memoirs.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for helping.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I can stick around. I want to do a pop quiz. And then if you guys want to stick around a little longer, I'm fine if that's okay with my, it's up to you guys. But I want to let you guys know about a couple of things right now. The 90-day memoir begins next week. So February 8th, and I want to offer you guys, it's actually the suggested donation is $1,500. The minimum donation is $750. And it's a 90-minute workshop every week. It's live with me, followed by a Q&A every class. So there's 14 sessions. And we've been talking about it for the last hour. I'm going to guide you through the process of creating the first draft of your memoir. And I'm going to offer a special price for all California Writers Club members. All you have to do is email info@lawriterslab.com. Don't forget the S, info@lawriterslab.com, and just put CWC Memoir in the subject heading. And my assistant will send you the discount link. All right. Any questions on that? Does anybody have any questions about the 90-day memoir? You can just shout it out. Okay, oh, go ahead.
I have a question. It's Judy. You said you meet once a week. What time is that of day? I work, so.
Oh, okay. It's recorded. So a lot of the writers, or at least some of the writers, take the workshop. So it's Thursday, February 8th, and it's 12 p.m. It's lunchtime. It's 12 to 1:30. I'm always on 15 minutes early to hang out and answer any questions. And then at 1:30, I do a Q&A. So it's a 90-minute class, 12 to 1:30. And then I'm around at the beginning and the end to answer questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Now, I want to give away some free stuff. So here's the email address if you want free stuff, info@lawriterslab.com. Two things. I do a writing challenge every year, and it's free. And I give away an 8-day Tuscany retreat. We just gave it away this month. So you can join the writing challenge. You can just email info@lawriterslab and just say, I want to join the writing challenge. Write 100 words a day. I came up with this because I came up with this a little over a year ago because I wanted to really, I wanted to tighten up my habit. I wanted to write every single day. And so I'm always thinking about my students. So I'm like, well, they should be doing this. And so I created this, and people are loving it. You write 100 words a day. You can, to help defray the cost, because it's expensive to run this challenge, you can also get a daily writing prompt every day for 365 days. And it's $5 a month. It's the price of a latte. And it doesn't pay for the challenge entirely, but it helps me. So you can sign up for that. Also, we meet every Friday. This is also free. Join us on Zoom, like we're doing right now. We write for an hour from 9 to 10 a.m. every Friday morning. I'm on 15 minutes early to hang out and answer questions. But we write together, and it's probably the most productive hour of my week. There's no distractions. There's something about writing as a group that I really love. We don't share the writing, but we do writing. And so please join us for that. You're welcome. You don't need to be in any of the classes to be a part of the community. So I just want you to know you're welcome to join us. Just email info@lawriterslab.com. More free stuff. We've been talking a little bit about outlines today. So if you'd like to receive free PDFs of the outlines for Cheryl Strayed's Wild and Allen Ginsberg's Howl, which is a 1960s experimental poem that I break down into 3-act structure just to show you how even a poem that's experimental you can still identify the key stages in the protagonist's journey. So you might find that helpful. Email me info@lawriterslab.com and we'll send them to you. Okay, are you guys ready for pop quiz? Get ready to write your answer in the chat bar. I have given you the answer to this question. I was very clever when I was talking to you guys to make sure I gave you the answer. Are you ready?
Yes.
Are you ready to type it in the chat? Get your fingers hot and ready to type. The first 5 answers win a free 90-day memoir ebook. Okay, here's the pop quiz, folks. I'm going to say it as a, there are two ingredients to a dilemma. One is a powerful desire. What is the second one? Powerful desire and a all right, I'm going to look in the sidebar here. What have we got? What have we got? Yes, yes. Yeah, okay. You're right. It's a false belief. So I'm gonna write down who's the first one. Belief. False belief. Deborah, you're the first one. Deborah. Yep. Harry. H-A. Okay, Deborah, Harry. Carla. Catherine. And Judy. Okay. Deborah, Harry, Carla, Catherine, and Judy. Congratulations. You are now the proud owner of a 90-day memoir ebook.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, you guys. It's so great to talk with you.
It was awesome. I enjoyed it tremendously.
Thank you. Mike, what do you want to do? I can hang out a little bit longer if anybody has any burning questions, or you can send me to dinner.
Well, it's up to you guys. What do you guys want to do? Do you want to let them go eat, or do you have any pressing questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How did you come up with this idea of the 90 days?
Great
Maybe I
question.
missed it at the beginning.
I started meditating about 30 years ago, and I was meditating one day, and I was thinking about my students, and or at least they came into my mind. And I remember because I had a Monday night workshop, and I'd been doing this workshop at my dining table for a couple of years, and they had a blast, and it was a 3-hour class, and everybody did a ton of writing during the week, but they weren't completing their manuscripts. And it was, and I was like, oh my God. I thought about how I had my first sort of success. And I was like, that's what it is. We've got to write the first draft quickly. And so and then I started researching, and I was like, oh my God, this is the secret that so many successful writers already know, from Steinbeck to Stephen King, to get the first draft down quickly. And then you can do the rewrite. The rewrite I've got a rewrite class. I just had it today. I've got a rewrite masterclass Tuesday mornings where they read their work every week, and they do share their work. And I don't like the word critique for some reason, but I think of in terms of feedback, and my feedback is very much the Socratic method. I ask a lot of questions. Because my job is to support the writer in expressing what they want to express. It's not imposing my ideas. It drives me crazy when somebody isn't curious about what the other writer is trying to do. They just want to go, hey, you should do this. That's not feedback. That's something else. So that's where the idea came from.
So let me remind everybody, we have a follow-up meeting with Al in June.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
yeah.
So the process is, now that we've read the book, we've met with him. Now let's all get to work. Let's write our memoirs. And then in June, let's bring our stuff and talk about what we've learned and what we discovered, and have this wonderful interaction with Al about all of the process and what it's meant to us.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I want to mention one other thing before I forget. If anybody's interested in coming to Tuscany for the writing retreat, I have 2 spots left for the May 20th retreat. So it's
Al,
a life-changing experience. Yes.
I was thinking about that, but I saw it's catered Do you do gluten-free food at all, or is it all pasta over there?
Yeah. No, it's they do gluten-free. Yes, we have a 5-star chef. It's the you know what? I can show it to you right now. Yeah, it's gluten-free. If you want, it's not all gluten-free. But yeah, it's very, we've got a 24-hour concierge. It's really, it's you get there and it's all about you just doing your writing and being kind of catered to, so that you don't have to do anything except focus on your work. Here's our group. I can let me see if I can show you. These are the room. Oh, yeah. Whoops. They're beautiful rooms. With every room has its own ensuite bathroom. There's a swimming pool, and oh, that's my wife. That's Bob. I'm trying to get to, oh, there, and that's the villa. And yeah, anyway, if anybody wants to talk about it offline, there are 2 spots left. It's limited to 12 writers, and there's the challenge. Okay, all right, I'm trying to get out of this. There we go. All right, so
Al,
yes.
may I ask a couple quick questions? I've been writing scientific articles for a half a century. I always prepare an outline before I begin such an article. And I'm wondering, you mentioned an outline at some point in your presentation. Do you invariably, when you prepare a memoir, write an outline, or do you tend to avoid doing that with a memoir because it's so different?
No, the first month of the 90-day memoir is all about, I don't think of it in terms of preparing an outline. We work with the structured questions, and an outline emerges as a result of working with these structured questions. But absolutely, I think it's really important to have some kind of blueprint to work from. Otherwise, you're writing your idea of your story.
Right.
Here's the irony of an outline, is that when you have an outline, you can stray from it with confidence, because you've got a sense of a beginning, middle, and an end. But I always say, if you ever have to choose between the aliveness of your characters or your idea of your story structure, always choose the aliveness of your characters, because it's going to lead you back to your structure. But the thing is, story structure is not about, it's sort of like, if I say, okay, this is a scene in my structure where Billy asks Sally to marry him, and Sally says yes. Well, if all that happens in the scene is that Billy says, Sally, will you marry me? And Sally says yes, there is no scene. Nothing actually happened, because there's no conflict. Without conflict, meaning can't be expressed. So, but if I get to the scene and Billy says, Sally, will you marry me? And Sally says yes, but only if you agree to work for my father, the hitman. Now we've got a conflict. Now we've got a scene, right? Because now he's got a dilemma. I'm in love with Sally, but I don't want to be a hitman. Do you follow? And so the outline that you're going to create is going to be born out of your protagonist's dilemma. Sure. And the dilemma is going to carry the tension, the dramatic tension that drives your narrative. Right? So an outline isn't just, an outline is not a series of situations. It's not an outline. An outline builds, the story builds in meaning as it progresses. So an outline is about, this happens, which causes this to happen, but then this happens. So an outline means that it's all in the book, but you're gonna really connect to your worthy antagonists, because without worthy antagonists, there's nothing for your protagonist to, bang up against, so that they can be transformed. Because that's really, story really is alchemy. It's only through pressure or conflict your protagonist will become transformed.
Well, I'll certainly look forward to reading your book. The other question I have is between drafts.
Yeah.
how long do you wait? Do you put the manuscript in a file for a week or 6 weeks, or do you have a set amount of time so you can let
Different.
things
It's a
gel?
great, Robert, that's such a great question. I think it's different for every project for me and different for every project, but I think there is value to sort of just letting it breathe for a little bit so you can come back with fresh eyes.
Yeah. I have a friend who's an artist, a painter, and he told me that when he finishes a wildlife art, he turns it around. He turns the frame around on the wall, lets it sit there for several weeks, turns it around and looks at it. And it's like a thorn bush poking him in the eyes. He can see all the places that he wants to improve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very much like writing.
I totally agree. I'm also a painter, so I relate to that analogy. Yeah, thanks, Robert. I'm
Thank
glad
you so much. Appreciate your talk.
Yeah, thank you.
So Al, there's been 2 questions. One, the people who won, how do they get their emails to you so
Oh.
that you can send them the ebook?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. I email my assistant, Kat. Her name is Kat, K-A-T, at info@lawriterslab.com. And she already is expecting Deborah, Harry, Carla, Catherine, and Judy. Email her and say, hi, I'm California Writers Club, and I just won a 90-day memoir ebook. Please send it to me. And she will send it to you.
And then someone else asked, how often are the retreats?
The retreats are every spring, every May. We go to Tuscany. This is our, we started in 2019. Missed 2 years because of the pandemic. So this will be our fourth time going to Tuscany.
Perfect. And the website that you showed, that's your LA Writers?
Yeah, LA Writers Lab.
LAWriterslab.com. So anybody that wants to go and explore, that's the good place to explore. LAWriterslab.com.
That's it. Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Sure. I think we need to give Al a big hand, and go ahead and unmute yourselves, everybody, and let's let him hear our appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You.
It was nice to meet you guys. And if you guys have any questions, you can always email me at info@lawriterslab.com, or Al is my al@lawriterslab.com. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Perfect.
Thanks, Al.
I am stuffed. I wish I didn't eat that third piece.
Wait, I have to mute us.
Well, Al, we're gonna let you go.
That was the highlight of my night.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Thanks,
sir.
you guys.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah.